the reality is that, it comes in waves. And I think that's another way of helping ourselves let go of emotion. When we can look at our emotions in terms of waves, the Buddhists would say that we get trapped into cycles of aversion and clinging. Aversion is, I don't want to feel that. And clinging is the attachment. And we can do that with our emotions. And we start thinking obsessively about the hurt, and that makes it last even longer. When we can look at our emotions like a wave, allow ourselves to feel them, let it wash through you, and recognize that this too shall pass.
Welcome. This show empowers you to confront and overcome addiction with real stories, inspiration, and a host of resources. Our growing community supports, uplifts, and takes action to enable a new way of living. Now, F3 Recovery brings you the Super Sober Podcast. All right, welcome to SSP 32 Super Sober Podcast. Here we go. We're doing part 2 of a series of letting go. The last one on 31 was Jessica M on letting go. Now we're going to be doing SSP 32 on the second of hopefully 3. I don't know how many series we're going to do on this letting go, but maybe I'll just have to let that go. Just want to let you know I'm your host, Brett C. I'm an RN with a BSN. I have a sobriety date of 4/21/03. I've been working in hospitals and helping people with a crazy convoluted disease addiction, working in treatment for over 10 years now. We have an unbelievable second time guest, and that is James Breon right here. He goes by Jim or Big Dog. And he was on episode number 17. So if you want to get to know him and why he became an LMFT, which is licensed marriage family therapist, and a little bit of our background, where we met and how we helped out and how he's breaking down trauma and all of the unbelievable insights, that's on podcast number 17. But without further ado, here's Jim right here on podcast 32.
Hey, Brett, it's good to be here again. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. And what do you do?
What do I do? Well, I'm a licensed psychotherapist. I'm doing telehealth only right now. Since the pandemic, my whole practice shifted to telehealth. So I work with individuals, teens, couples, focusing a lot on trauma, attachment. And life is good. The practice is strong. I do a lot of stuff on social media, and it's kind of fun to put some educational stuff out there, hopefully to give some people some good information, because there's also a lot of bad info out there.
Right. And if you need to see any of the good information that he's talking about, you can just fire him up on YouTube. He's on the resources page on f3recovery.org, and you can see him on his Instagram page. Tons and tons of followers, great information. If you're trying to suss out the psychological dramas of 2025 on your own, good luck on that one. But there is help, let me tell you. But first, we're going to do some quick shout outs like we always do here. First, we're going to shout out the best producer in the business back there on Solomon at the podcast place here at Long Beach, California, giving us the platform and the safe place to land to put this information out for you. And then we're also going to do the sobriety milestone shout outs right here. We're going to do Valerie C with 6 years. Yes. Good job, Valerie. And then we're going to do Brandon U for 14 years. As of today, we're shouting this out. And he's on episode 25 on Giving Back. So if you want to see Brandon U's story, it was a really cool podcast. He's got great energy. You can see him on 25. You can see Jim on 17. You can just binge watch all the stuff. And I wanted to give a special shout out why I'm thinking about it is we've been having a lot of downloads, and people have been doing some binge downloads or whatever. We had like up to 70 downloads in one day and 30 on another day. So whoever's downloading it out there, we super appreciate it. And we're just going to get right into it here, though. We're going to do on letting go. We're going to be doing 4 videos, and it's going to be very insightful. So we know that the program, they say, can be summed up in 2 words, and that's letting go. It's not becoming more of what you're not. It's about letting go of so much so you can actually become more of who you really are. And it's a convoluted process sometimes, but so much needs to be let go. And a lot of what needs to be let go is never really yours to deal with in the first place. So Working with Jim many years ago, it seems like such a long time ago, but Jim always really impressed us that we worked with, and we knew he was going to go on to do big things. So we're going to do the first video right now, and we're going to go to that because we know addiction is a relationship, and we need to let go of this relationship. So we're going to be doing 4 videos. This will be the first one. Solomon, can you cue it up?
Hey, Jim, so is it ever too late to get out of a hurtful relationship?
Really the only time, and I mean this seriously, the only time it's too late to get out of a toxic or dangerous relationship is if you're dead as a result of it. It's always easier to get out of a dangerous or a toxic relationship earlier rather than later. And the longer you stay, the more your self-esteem and self-confidence is diminished, and even your ability to make clear, rational choices, especially if you've got a history of childhood trauma or attachment trauma or trauma-bonded relationships.
Wow. Don't wait till it's too late to quit this addiction relationship that's going on. Like so many people, if you don't think your sobriety time, whatever, how long is important, it's a lot of time to a dead person. Mm-hmm. And this relationship with addiction and a lot of other relationships, we just need to let go. And it's very, we were going over it a little bit before the podcast. So just lean into it, Jim. Tell us what you think about that video and a little bit on touching on the childhood trauma, attachment trauma, and a little bit of the trauma bonding that we need to let go of this addiction relationship or just relationships in general.
Well, that particular video, I think, was done in the context of thinking about interpersonal relationships. Mm-hmm. You know, I work with a lot of people who are recovering from abusive relationships. But you can absolutely think of, an unhealthy relationship with alcohol, an addiction as it's a relationship, right?
For sure.
And in a lot of ways, many people are drawn to addiction because of some unresolved issues that start beginning when you're very, very young. Mm-hmm. I talked a little bit about childhood trauma, and when we think about childhood trauma or what results in complex PTSD, it can be childhood neglect. It can be attachment wounding. We were talking a little bit earlier about this whole idea of attachment, and that's a big focus of what I work on with people is, an attachment is a connection that you start to develop very, very early with your earliest caregivers, who are usually our parents, right? And in order to develop a secure attachment, we need certain things. We need to have people that are attuned to us, that are curious about our internal state, that help us feel safe and protected, that encourage us to become the best version of ourselves, not the version they want us to be, but the version we're meant to be. We need to be able to be soothed and comforted when we're in distress. And if we get enough of all that stuff, and parents don't have to be perfect, they just have to be good enough. But if we don't get a lot of that stuff, we can develop what we think of as an insecure or an anxious attachment style. Mm-hmm. And particularly growing up in a situation where you're not attuned to, where your parents aren't trying to meet your emotional needs, that process can literally set somebody up to develop an addiction, because some of the research on attachment and neural development, tells us that growing up with a lack of attunement can literally create a lower level of dopamine receptors in the brain as it develops. Wow. So, and dopamine is one of those chemicals that it helps us feel good. It creates a sense of anticipation. But if you think about somebody who has a lower level of dopamine in their system, they are primed to look for something to give them more dopamine.
Right.
Hence, substance, alcohol, drugs, porn, sex, food, gambling. The issue that happens though is that once you find some way to kind of regulate yourself, which is essentially that's what it is. It's a self-regulation mechanism. your brain starts getting these huge spikes of dopamine, right? And then your brain's like, wait a minute, we need this thing called equilibrium. There's way too much dopamine. So then what happens is the brain actually starts to prune out more dopamine receptors. So you can see how that whole process of addiction is it just plays out, where you have to use more of the substance. You have to, do more of the behavior. So, it's really fascinating when we see how early childhood trauma can literally prime a person's brain for addiction.
Yeah. And to understand that, it just seems like a lot of people, when they start talking about it, we've talked a lot about it on the podcast, neural pruning, neuroplasticity, all of these big fancy words. But if you take a little bit of time to learn about it, breaking it down really simply, thanks for doing that, we also can plane out and work on our recovery and then get better, more helpful dopamine hits. But we have to allow ourselves to get that new neutrality or baseline or homeostasis, right? We have to go through a real period of letting go of a lot of different things that used to give us those dopamine hits and get more natural dopamine hits, which takes us into neuroplasticity. And that's the brain's ability to change, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like in neuroscience, they say that neurons that fire together wire together, and you can see how when your brain and your nervous system starts to understand that the way I feel safe, the way I feel okay is by using some kind of substance.
Right.
And the pleasure and reward centers of the brain wire together with the emotion regulation parts of the brain. And that's why addiction is so difficult to defeat. But it's absolutely possible because that's all learned behavior in a sense. And if you can learn it, you can unlearn it.
Yeah, that's exactly. And that's about letting it go. Can we learn it and then actually let it go? Because some people don't want to let go of this crazy relationship that they find themselves in. So, that's really good. And it's very, we're into that here. We one of our favorite guys, I like to shout him out, is Joe Dispenza. Mm-hmm. He breaks down all of that stuff where your focus goes, your energy flows, the neurons that fire together, wire together, and just actually learning about it. So, a lot of people just kind of shut off when we start talking about this particular topic of where we're going on, mm-hmm. but it's really out there. The epigenetics, we had Dr. Higgins talking about it on episode 15 and breaking down the biological markers. And it's super cool that we have you here. And usually when you're taking people through on breaking down, when you're doing a session with them, do you get into that aspect with them?
Yeah, absolutely. Talk a lot about the what happens in the brain, because I think that when you can name something, you can tame something.
Right. Yeah.
And if you just don't understand the reason why, you don't know what to do. So once you identify what's actually happening and you can identify that, oh, my brain has kind of woven together to create these neural pathways that really kind of make substance use kind of my go-to mechanism, but I can also unwire those pathways.
The neural pruning, like what you were saying, the neural pruning. And that's the unwiring, right?
The thing about letting go, though, is I think some people think that it's a one-shot deal. Yeah. Once I learn how to let go, I've just let go and I'm good. But the reality is that it's a lifelong, everyday, moment-to-moment process.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And there's so much that comes into it, from learning to have compassion for yourself,
right,
so that you don't want to hang on to stuff that you need to let go of.
Right.
Developing a sense of mindful awareness, so you can tell the difference between my mind being worrying about the future, regretting the past.
Mm-hmm.
Those are some of the main ways that we hang on to stuff.
Yeah.
We need to learn, a lot of new ways of coping.
Right. Because we took away, when it comes to addiction, we took away their number one coping skill. So what are we going to do? What are they going to do? And that's why I had you come on, because there's so much in the program where I see so many people that I know personally that struggled to stay sober, that now have therapists like yourself and are staying sober. they got the missing piece. And the program is always, the 12-step program is always very clear about getting more help. If you need it and wherever it is, we don't have a monopoly on how you get the help or where you get it. And I see some unbelievable sobriety in people that were stuck, get good therapists like yourself, and then get the missing piece and the extra little help that they needed to go back into it.
Yeah, because sobriety is stopping the use.
Right.
Recovery is healing.
Right.
And a lot of times you have to understand what were the reasons that I was looking to numb myself in the first place. And sometimes we look at childhood trauma or
Right.
maybe even undiagnosed mental illness. You've got to look at the root causes. Of course, having fellowship and having a program is huge.
Right.
Whether it's AA or refuge recovery, smart recovery, you've got to have some process to help you make sense out of it. And I think a fellowship of other people that you can relate to, so you don't feel like it's just me.
Yeah, definitely. So here we go on to video number 2. So let's fire that one up. And this one's going to be on some defense mechanisms and what pops up when it comes that you will see when you try to let go. All right, so let's go to...
What are 5 common defense mechanisms?
Defense mechanism is a way we learn how to cope with our anxieties, our emotions, and life. They can be mature or immature. Immature coping mechanisms, defense mechanisms keep us from actually facing our problems. Things like denial, pretending that the problem isn't there, sweeping it under the rug. Splitting, where somebody makes the other person all good or all bad. This is a very primitive defense mechanism. Projection, where we project our stuff onto other people. We accuse other people of doing the things that we're doing. Compartmentalization can be positive or negative coping skill, where we just take parts of our experience and we sort of like put it in a box, we isolate it for a time. And then sublimation is probably the healthiest defense mechanism. That's where we take our own personal pain, struggles, anxieties, and we transmute them into something positive to create change in our lives.
Wow, that's super cool. The defense mechanisms, right? They say when you're going to level up or when you're going to be practicing the program or to keep you in your little safe space, even if it's not a safe space, but how the mind's wired, your body will throw out your biggest character defects as like, oh, this big boogeyman thing coming up. And it's like, so break that down a little bit. I can see the denial. We all know about denial, right? And then the splitting. I mean, that's a great one, right? We're just going to, especially like at work or, right, they would call staff splitting or trying to push people against each other or lots of different kinds of splitting and the projecting. Yeah. Definitely always putting that up there. Like, what about me? No, what about you? It's always like, well, you have these problems. It's like, wait, can we talk about you for a minute?
Yeah.
Right. And compartmentalization. Oh man, these are all like big defense mechanisms that'll keep you away from getting the help that you need, right?
Yeah. Well, compartmentalization in particular, sometimes we actually have to be able to compartmentalize stuff. Meaning for right now, the conflicting thoughts, feelings, you have to kind of put them in a box somewhere. Somebody who's a first responder, policeman, a fireman, surgeons, nurses, you have to be able to put stuff in a box, for a period of time. But when that starts to become your main strategy for coping, it starts to turn into suppression and like emotional suppression. And that's when, addictive behaviors come in too.
Right.
I like to say
You're
that
never circling back to actually get back to what you compartmentalize and it's stuck inside of you.
Right. And it's just stuff that is kind of like relegated to what we think of as the shadow, stuff that I just don't want to look at. It's too much shame to look at it. I'm going to pretend it's not there. That's when the denial comes in too. But there are kind of primitive defense mechanisms like that, and there are more advanced ones. And sublimation is the psychological term for really the healthiest form of healthiest defense mechanism. And that's when you take some negative situation in your life and you actually turn it into something positive.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. I think that's what AA helps people to do.
Right.
That's what recovery does. Because people who are in recovery, quite often are much better people than they were, before they ever started that process.
Right.
Because they've understood themselves. They've taken, a radically honest look at themselves, taken responsibility. And I like to think of it as sort of like it can be the gift wrapped in crap.
Right. I remember we touched that on the last podcast.
Where it's something that once you overcome it and you go through that process of changing your thoughts, feelings, behaviors, getting back to core values, it's something that then you can actually help other people overcome as well.
Right. Like I was going to touch on that aspect of it, is the final stage of healing is using what happened to you to help other people. And that's amazing though, right? And it says in the program that the economy won't be wasted of your past. We won't shut the door on it. We're going to turn all of your past transgressions, and then you're going to be able to help somebody out with it. I've been working on that for now year 23, that all of my past, and then all the stuff that I've been learning too throughout the years, that I'm able to help the next person. And then I see the next person that I've helped go and do that too. But a lot of people, I think compartmentalization too, when they get into the steps that kind of brought to memory, is that they want to rush into further steps. And it's like, you're not even on step 3 yet. And you want to start doing step 8 and 9. You want to start doing step 10, 11, but we haven't finished 4 and 5 yet. And so compartmentalizing and getting back to it can also be a good aspect, but people want to just go ahead and open everything else up, but they don't have the coping skills to deal with the steps when they're going backwards.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, then that's sort of like the essence of addiction, right? It's the quickest, easiest way to stop feeling what I'm feeling.
Right. Yeah.
And what's the quickest, easiest way to kind of get through these steps? And yeah, it's about self-awareness, and it's about slowing down and taking time to look, diligently at how did I develop this, these different strategies and these different false versions of myself, some that I show to people, others that I don't.
So like, how long would it take for you during a session with someone to hit on some of these points right here? That, let's say if someone was going to start doing therapy with you, what's like some of these things where you would hit first on?
Oh, it's a good question. I think it's all individual. It depends on the person and, what the issues that lead them into therapy are. I like to generally start off helping people, make the connections between the nature of their own thoughts and their feelings and their behaviors, sort of that cognitive behavioral aspect, which I think is sort of a necessary but not sufficient element. Because then, once we understand the way our mind works, well, we have to learn ways to make it work differently.
Right.
That's when I'll introduce people to concepts like mindfulness, which is a state of awareness that lets you pay attention on purpose in the present moment without getting caught up into your, thoughts or driven by your emotions. And gradually walk through those different elements of what would it be like for me to live a life on purpose with meaning that's not just driven by the pleasure principle,
right? Or just being reactive to every emotion that comes up, or every thought, or
that's huge. That's huge. Many people live in a reactive
state.
Mental state, and sometimes we just have to learn how to stop, don't react, feel whatever you're feeling, think about how do I want to respond instead, and as Viktor Frankl said, when you can put some space between the stimulus and the response, that's where your freedom is.
And who is Viktor Frankl?
Viktor Frankl was a psychologist who wrote a very small little book years ago called Man's Search for Meaning.
Okay.
And it was about his experience of living through the death camp in Auschwitz.
Oh, that's where I had heard about him before,
Yeah.
and how he was very positive, and he decided that he wasn't going to get down on the whole situation, and that's what helped him survive the whole process of being in Auschwitz, which was the #1 concentration camp in World War II.
The worst
Yeah, I had
possible
heard about that,
situation you can ever imagine. And I think his main thesis was even in the worst situations, we still have choice as to how we respond.
Right.
Because there were some people in that situation that to get an extra piece of bread, they would, snitch on somebody else. They would, steal from other people. And there were other people that maintained their values. So even in the worst situations, we still have choice as to how we respond,
Right.
if we can step out of reactivity.
And that was a guiding step for him too, because I remember some of the story about him and if that guy could be grateful and turn it around, because they immediately killed his wife, right?
I don't remember all the particulars.
Yeah, that's what I remember. And he had his wedding ring still. And usually they kind of stripped you of all that. So he got rid of his wedding ring and made the conscious choice that he was going to move forward and live the best he could, because a lot of people died there which they were counting on is the lack of hope, right? Or the ability to survive. And then he got out and wrote an unbelievable book on it and have helped people. And we're talking about it to this day. And I had just recently heard about it too, when people were talking about their mindset on Viktor Frankl. So kind of crazy that just came up. Yeah. If he can do it in Auschwitz, and if anybody wants to go back and see how people survived that was crazy. Talk about some cognitive dissonance in World War II when they first heard about concentration camps. People's minds couldn't wrap around it, that there was actually something going on. And then they finally got word back to Eisenhower, and other people were like, no, that can't be true. And they didn't have the ability to stop them doing it with the bombing strategies that have. And it's kind of weird. We just went on a little segue into World War II about someone that could be grateful from that and come out on the other side and write a book about it. And then that was like his intention, I believe, from what I remember.
Yeah, I think it really does focus on, the power of conscious choice.
Right.
And, if you can live through a situation like that, you can certainly, overcome other issues in your life.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. What's our excuse? I had a bad day in my neighborhood or something, right? And it just goes to show that you can be grateful in any aspect. You can overcome any area. And we're talking about people healing where they're at and letting go of what they thought they were or where they're at or how they could heal. And we're talking about a lot of people. What Jared said, everybody's on the trauma spectrum. Here we are shouting it out again. And then we have Jim talking about it here. And let's do a little bit on what would be the denial and splitting aspect that you see usually in the defense mechanisms for people in addiction.
Well, denial, I think that's a real common thing. You first in denial that I have a problem. You pretend that and for many people struggling with an addiction, whether it's a substance addiction or a process addiction, that level of self-effacingness, of being honest with yourself, it can take a long time. And sometimes people have to hit some kind of a bottom or some kind of a tragic event in their life to actually wake up and realize, wow, I need to do something about this.
Yes.
Splitting is what happens when it's really sort of a very, very primitive black and white way of looking at things. And something I think that's really interesting is black and white thinking is at the root of literally most, if not all, mental illness. When a child is very small, they look at everything in very black and white terms. Mommy's good or mommy's bad, and it takes a while for them to understand that, mommy, daddy can be good, but they can also be mean sometimes, or sometimes they don't give me what I want, but that doesn't mean that they're bad. Somebody who reverts to splitting, this is something that we often see in people with personality disorders, where somebody with a borderline personality construction, they might look at you as if you're the best thing that ever happened to them, and then something happens that they don't like, and all of a sudden you are the devil incarnate, you know, and they will go back and forth between idealizing and devaluing you. This is something that happens with people with highly narcissistic personalities. And that splitting is something that often can be the result of very early severe childhood trauma.
Yeah, and that's like a lot of people when they get presented with any kind of help, they're like, oh, it's black and white with it. There's no gray area. It's like, oh, I'm not going to AA or NA. No, that's for those kind of people. And it's like, you want help? They're all, nope. It's like, oh, go to residential treatment? Nope. That's for those other, I don't got time. Nope. Very black and white. So here we are at the middle of the podcast. We're going to go to our commercial break here. And if you need any help with His House New Creation, and that number is 877-345-4138. And that number again is 877-345-4138. We're going to go to a quick commercial break, and we'll be back for the other two videos in just a few minutes.
Welcome to the place where it all began, the 9th Street House. Our maiden journey into hope and recovery for His House New Creation treatment centers since 1994. Right next door, the 9th Street apartment building stands as a testament to our commitment to providing comfortable and safe spaces for recovery. And on the other side, nestled amidst nature's best, our Palm House offers a tranquil haven to begin the path to sobriety. You'll find 12 unique His House New Creation treatment centers across Southern California. Just as recovery encompasses inner and outer transformation, our facilities mirror this philosophy. The external beauty of our homes reflect the nurturing and healing environments you'll discover within. These are just glimpses of the harmonious spaces where we support your journey to recovery. Our state-licensed and highly accredited programs echo this sentiment. We know that successful addiction treatment is more than skin deep. It requires a robust plan that heals the mind, strengthens the body, and nourishes the soul. We select the best facility to cater to your unique needs, providing focused, compassionate care that sets you firmly on the path to sobriety and hope. Welcome to His House New Creation Treatment Centers, where the journey to a healthier you begins. Your recovery begins here with us.
Okay, we're back. Thanks for taking a minute to listen to Glenn's Treatment Center out there, the sponsor of the Super Sober podcast. We just did the last two videos on the series here we're doing of Letting Go with Jim Breon right here, LMFT. We're going to do a couple more videos, and the next one we're going to do on is in the grieving process, because we know this relationship with addiction. I myself had a relationship of 20 years with it. I celebrated many birthdays. Some of them, I remember my 16th birthday, it was me in a six-pack at the local high school. All the times and good times and bad times. That's like why it's a super important thing where the goodbye letter that we write, which your sponsor will hopefully have you do, a goodbye letter to your addiction. This relationship that I had for so long, I had to grieve it. And usually after 2 years of the grieving process, but we know that's different for everybody. We're going to touch on that. But here's a brief description. Grieving the loss of addiction is a complex emotional process that involves acknowledging both the positive and negative aspects of addiction experience. And it is a crucial part of recovery. So we're going to get into more of the relationship process with this on this third video, which is breaking down the grieving process. Can we do that one, Solomon?
Hey, Jim. So how long does the grieving process take?
The grieving process is going to be a totally individual thing. It's going to be different for every person, and there's no way you can predict how long it's going to take. There's so many different factors that go into it, including the nature of the relationship, how complicated or difficult was that relationship, how long did you know and love the person, what are your spiritual and religious ideas about afterlife and death and dying. There's so many individual differences that go into it that there's no way to predict how long it's going to be. Some people grieve for months or years, some people for the rest of their lives.
Wow. The grieving process, right? There's 5 key aspects to the grieving process, right? It's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Denial, initially individuals may struggle to accept the reality of their addiction and its consequences, often defending their relationship with substances. Anger, as they begin to confront the loss, feelings of anger may arise directed towards themselves, their addiction, or even others who contributed to their struggles. Bargaining, this stage may involve attempts to negotiate with oneself or others about the possibility of returning to old habits or minimizing the perceived loss. Depression, acknowledging the depth of the loss can lead to feelings of sadness and despair as individuals reflect on what they have given up. And then acceptance. Ultimately, reaching a stage of acceptance allows individuals to recognize the necessity of letting go of their addiction and embracing a new way of life. And I've personally gone through all those stages when sometimes I get angry that I don't have the ability to numb things out or see other people in their addiction or homeless on the side of the street that just nobody's expecting anything out of them. They're just totally living in their own little world. And it's pretty sick to say that, but that's sometimes what I miss is that aspect of like, if anything was going to trigger me to go back out and use or anything, is that kind of freedom that I liked where no one was expecting anything out of Brett. And it was just like, what was going to be happening in today? Not much, but definitely getting loaded. And I had to really go through those stages of grieving with my addiction. And the steps helped me out with that. Definitely writing the letter, the goodbye letter, and doing my own epitaph, another tool that we do. So break down a little bit of that right there on that last video of the grieving process, because people, and especially these days, like the cycle of life that's going on right now, I've never seen it like it is. I mean, I think everybody I know personally knows someone that's passing or has passed, not only from this disease, but different complications of how sick people are and collaterally by age or people are extremely sick right now. And a lot of people are getting cancer and a lot of other diseases. And I personally could probably, in the last 2 months, probably 20 to 40 people, I would say that I either personally know or personally know someone that one of their loved ones in an immediate family has passed.
Yeah. Well, you know, when we talk about grieving, and again, that video was done in the context of grieving the loss of a person. You know, absolutely. When you give up, you know, your drug of choice or substance of choice, that's a relationship too. And if anybody who's ever been in love with an addict or alcoholic knows what it's like to be in a 3-way relationship. Yes. There's you, the person, and then the substance of choice, right? Letting go of that. I think what's so difficult about it is that that's been your main way of regulating yourself, you know, whether it takes away that feeling of being burdened by other people's expectations. What do they need from me? What do they want from me? Or, you know, just feeling a loss of connection. It's been said that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. Right. You know, and if we look at addiction through the lens of attachment also, you know, a substance or some process, maybe it's sexual acting out or gambling, it's a way of feeling connected, and it not necessarily feel that it makes you feel happy, but it just makes you feel safe. You know, and it seems to meet all of those needs. I think in reality, what it ends up doing is it just numbs you. It just makes you. It kind of makes you not feel. You know, many people go through. You know, talking about grief, they go through those stages not in a linear process. Yeah. You know, you might be in denial at first, and then you kind of get pissed off that I've got to do this now, and I can't do that. And then you might feel little glimpses of acceptance, and then you go right back to anger again. You know, so those stages are not linear. Something I think that is important to recognize about grief is that the nature of grief is that it comes in waves. And you might be going through your own process of grieving, and maybe have recovered in some ways. And I know in my own personal experience that I've felt like I've kind of moved through, losing my mom, for instance, and felt like I was doing pretty well. And then 2, 3, 4 years afterwards, something triggers me and I'm hit with this another wave of grief that just kind of comes over, and you can be like, where did that even come from?
I thought I processed that.
Yeah. But the reality is that, it comes in waves. And I think that's another way of helping ourselves learn how to let go of emotions, is when we can look at our emotions in terms of waves. The Buddhists would say that one of the roots of human suffering is that we get trapped into cycles of aversion and clinging. Aversion is, I don't want to feel that. I don't want to see that. I don't want to look at it. I'm going to try to push it away, deny that it's there, suppress it, repress it, drink it away, whatever. And clinging is hanging on. It's the attachment, hanging on to, I wish this was different, and we can do that with our emotions, where we can latch on to our emotions and just get caught up into them. Then we start ruminating about them, and we start thinking obsessively about the hurt or the disappointment, and that makes it last even longer. I think when we can look at our emotions like a wave, allow ourselves to feel them, not push them away, but let it wash through you, and recognize that this too shall pass. That we really can overcome a lot of those waves of emotion. We don't have to get trapped and controlled by our emotions. We don't have to push them away either.
Right. There's a lot of lessons in emotions. If you can actually just feel it, it's like they're teachers.
Excellent.
It's like, why take it a little deeper than just feeling the root front part of the emotion? Why are you feeling that emotion? And you can transmute that energy. And then you can get also into what neuropeptides are cascading. That's why they say it too shall pass, because if you don't keep feeding it, it'll process through the wave coming through, and then you can ride it for a little while, and then you'll be in the trough of it and it'll feel normal again, right?
Yeah.
Kind of that aspect of it. But people don't teach us. I mean, they don't teach us about emotions and our body, and you can learn about the body in school, but they don't actually teach us anything about the miracle machine, of why that we say a lot of these cliche things like this too shall pass. But if you let it pass, it'll process through. And that goes back into the nervous system, and why zebras don't get ulcers, and the whole process of fight, flight, and freeze, and F3 recovery, and what we're doing here. And that's a whole another topic. You can get into it, but it's all together.
Yeah, that's true. And many of us never learned how to process emotions. We might even struggle to regulate our emotions, and especially for men in our culture. Most of us, we don't learn a lot about our emotions. We're raised from the time that we're very small with the boy code.
Yep.
Number one rule of the boy code: never let anybody see that you're weak.
Yeah. And
then we tell ourselves that having emotions is weak.
Boys don't cry.
Boys don't cry. Yeah.
I'll give you something to cry about. The older generation, like I was raised with, and
But we actually can learn ways to process emotions. It means allowing yourself to feel them, but detaching from the story. And when I think you can actually focus on a somatic level, like paying attention to the sensations in your body that emotions bring up, not attaching to the story of why she did that or they did that, but let go of that and just feeling the physical sensation of emotion. We do have them for reasons. They're teaching us something. They're trying to tell us something.
Yeah.
You can actually identify what it is that this emotion is trying to communicate to me, and you can let it move through you.
And it's it's a manipulation process after a while. It's like, I've been on this negative feedback on this emotion every time this something happens and triggers me with it. And it's like, when are we going to evolve? When are we going to actually take a look at it? And these days, so many people are doing it, though. I mean, it's really inspiring that we could talk about it on the podcast, but you can fire up a plethora of any of these topics we're talking about on YouTube or any aspect of Googling it, and it just comes up with people teaching it all over the place. It's super inspiring, actually, that you can learn about it.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the positive sides of the internet, social media, and whatnot. Unfortunately, especially with social media, and I know this sounds like a contradiction in terms because I put stuff on social media. There's so much misinformation and disinformation.
Right.
You have to really be able to trust the source of the info, but it's a potential gold mine to help us learn things that we had no access to learning before.
I know it's unbelievable. And there's so many people that are, I believe, teaching the correct ways of doing it. You can, just like anything, there's so much to filter out these days to sort through it, because a lot of people see an aspect of a social media post, and then they'll, especially when it comes to information about politics or anything else, they'll see a clickbait post, and then they'll take that as like real news.
Right.
I do it too, but depending on where it's coming from, and it seems like news has been, who watches the real news these days on channel 5 or 7? I go, I'm going to check into the Fear Factory real quick, and I'll go to 11, 7 or 5 and see what they're talking about. And it's like,
myself, I don't watch network news any longer, but I do know where to go for credible sources of news. I think that something to remember about social media, the algorithms.
Yes.
Scott Galloway says that the algorithm of social media platforms are designed like a Tyrannosaurus Rex nervous system. It's attracted to movement, heat, and emotion.
Wow.
So the things that are salacious get promoted.
Right.
The stuff that's neutral or maybe even calming, it doesn't register.
Yeah.
And you can start to see how it divides people into their own cognitive biases.
Oof. Man, that's a whole nother topic right there too, but that's awesome. So we're going to move on to the 4th video here. And if you have anybody that's going through any grief or processes, my condolences to anybody out there going through it, but getting a little bit of extra help to go through the stages and to be aware of it too. And there's also a 12-step stage process to get through also. And just knowing that after 2 years of sobriety, your chances of going up for long-term sobriety go way up, because you filtered 2 years of processing the grieving aspect of your old life. Like a lot of people get triggered in what they call the Bermuda Triangle of recovery, starting, at Thanksgiving, and then, moving in through Christmas and New Year's. We lose more addicts and alcoholics too there. But after a couple of years of grieving that process, even the Super Bowl, right? A lot of people, this is what I do during the Super Bowl. And then all the family people that have you in your compartmentalization. And then I'm going to bargain myself back into just having one, drink during Christmas. So after a couple of years of going through the aspects of the anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, and denial, moving through it in different stages and how it comes through, just be aware. Start to be aware what we're talking about. And then also, like where I was going with it though, but condolences to anybody that's struggling with letting go and then going through the process of any loved ones that have been lost recently. And we're going to go to the 4th video here. Solomon, can we pull that one up?
Jim, so what is radical acceptance?
Radical acceptance is a way of reducing your emotional suffering when it comes to dealing with things that you don't like, that you can't change. Radical acceptance means that when you realize that you're powerless to change a situation, but you still don't like it, it doesn't mean that you're going to decide that you like it, that it's okay. It's just that you're not going to continue resisting what is. It's the core truth that you find in the Serenity Prayer.
in AA. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to tell the difference. There's more that we talk about this in a YouTube video. You might want to check that out.
And then there we go, right there. He's throwing the one of the most famous prayers in the program. The Serenity Prayer is so powerful. And the acceptance prayer, 417, one of the most powerful prayers that Dr. Paul wrote, which actually helped save my life. I was not accepting of anything. And then we know that acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. And then a lot of people say, well, I'd never be accepting of that. Just because we're accepting doesn't mean we condone it. And you said it right there in that quick snippet of the video. So let's go into a little bit of what we want to talk about, radical acceptance.
Well, radical acceptance, it is that figuring out, like, what do I have control over and where do I not have control? The Stoic philosophers talked about the dichotomy of control, figuring out where do I have influence in my life and where do I just need to leave it up to providence or fate. Mm-hmm. And radical acceptance doesn't mean I'm just going to kind of give up and just pretend like I don't care. You can care deeply. Mm-hmm. But for me, I think radical acceptance, it points to the difference between pain and suffering. Mm. Pain in life is inevitable. We all experience it. We lose people, we lose jobs, we lose status. At some point in our aging process, our bodies start to change shape and form without our permission. And, everything is always changing. And if you just insist that it's not that way, that's the suffering. It's the resistance to the pain in our life is what creates a lot of our suffering. You've got this thing in your life that I really hate it the way that it is. Can't do anything about it. But have I told you lately how much I hate it? Just maintaining that resistance to what is. Radical acceptance, I think, is looking at. It doesn't mean that I like it now, that I want more of it. It just means that it's not the way I like it, but it doesn't have to be a catastrophe. Right. And if there's ever a moment that comes up where I can do something to change the situation, I'm going to do that. But it's really, deciding that I'm not going to create more suffering for myself.
Seems like that kind of goes into compartmentalization. You can radically accept it, compartmentalize it, move forward with what needs to happen, and then do a 10-step or however your process is, come back to it, and then go to another level of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about compartmentalizing, like putting things in a box for a while. Yeah. And right now, there's nothing I can do about it. But man, 3 weeks from now, I might be able to take that box out and do something about it, Yeah. And then when I've done everything I can, I'm going to put it back. But I'm not going to suffer going, I wish it was different. I wish it was different.
Right. Because it is what it is. Right. Simple thing everybody hates that. Well, it is what it is. Well, that's true. It is what it is. And certain things you're never going to be able to change. And I've had a lot of people recently go back to this coping skill of radical acceptance and using the pause, and then people going through crazy situations and then moving in, talking with them. And it's like, hey, how you doing today? And they're all, I'm in radical acceptance. And I think a lot of people listening have heard that either catchphrase with it, and you have a quick video on it. And those are the kind of snippets. If you go to Jim Breon's YouTube page or Instagram, you'll see a lot of this information going through. And it's really helpful. I've been in radical acceptance over a lot of things in my recovery.
Yeah. I think the radical part is now that I can learn how to practice acceptance with this, I'm going to try to apply it to everything in my life.
Right.
That's the radical.
And that's easier to let go of quicker. If you can just be in radical acceptance over it, and it's like, that's not something I can fix. And if I do fix it within a lot of different situations, it's like, man, the fixing part of it could be violent. And that your mind goes to that. And that's not the answer for a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people, if you've seen like what happened to, let's say if your kid was abused or a loved one was, and like for a lot of addicts and alcoholics or people on the streets, that's like the green light to go ahead and handle that. But now that we're in recovery, that we can't do that because that takes you out of of course, when you go to prison after you commit a crime like that, it's like, yeah, you got the rationalization and justification because that's what you would do if someone hurts one of your loved ones. But we have to get into radical acceptance, move on and look at the greater good for what's going on. And hopefully some kind of justice will be served in that aspect. And I've had some good friends go through that. And the healing that's happened through radical acceptance on the other end, instead of using their old coping skills and techniques, or not even a technique, just a reactive refractory period, which is very short and just going into it, but getting the pause and using acceptance and radical acceptance on the other end of it. It's been some unbelievable transformative scenarios.
Yeah. Yeah. When back to that idea of just pausing rather than reacting, the first thing you might want to do is like kill the SOB.
Yeah.
Recognize that, that's going to have some consequences.
Yes.
When I can pause and ask myself, wait a minute, how do I actually want to respond in this situation? That's where your choice comes. And when you can start to let go of the things that I can't control, you free up your mental and emotional, psychological bandwidth for the stuff that you can work on.
Right. Yeah. The serenity of prayer is so powerful. And a lot of people know it and say it, but when they break it down into the simplistic form of it, it's really, really powerful. It's really powerful, very transformative. So let's take a few minutes here. We're winding down. Let's take a few minutes and working with Jim here. All right. The benefits for addicts and alcoholics to have a therapist, and just a quick breakdown in a few minutes, what it's like and how you help people and how they can go from zero to working with Jim or any other therapist you would recommend them for.
As far as like, if you were interested in working with me, you can reach out to through my website. I would start with an initial consultation to figure out if this is a right fit or not. There are some issues that I would refer to a different therapist if somebody has an eating disorder or something that's not something that's one of my specialties. But it starts off with a consultation and understanding what the person's struggles are. So that's the first step, and then we develop a treatment plan, an idea of how are we going to get to where we want to be.
Right.
I like to work collaboratively with people so that, we form an authentic relationship with one another. There's an amount of safety that you have to develop because often what happens is once we continue to peel back the layers of the onion, so to speak, you have to get to trauma and some of the stuff that people haven't actually looked at or have not been aware of, on a conscious level. But we can make the unconscious conscious, and then we have something that we can work with.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So break down a little bit of the CBT and the EMDR.
So CBT stands for cognitive behavioral therapy. It's helping people understand that your thoughts, the types of thoughts that you have, create your emotions to a great extent, and vice versa. Some of the most recent research tells us that we often experience an emotion before we ever start having a thought about it. But our thoughts and our behaviors, our thoughts and our feelings drive our behaviors. And once we start to understand that, we can look at ways of restructuring some of those thoughts, looking at what are my cognitive distortions? Am I a black and white thinker? Do I catastrophize a lot? Do I take things personally? Do I mind read, try to figure out what's in somebody else's mind?
Yes.
That's do I discount the positive? Am I one of those people that I get my review at work and it's 5 stars on 14 out of 15 things, and a 4 star is on one. And the only thing I can focus on is, that one
missing star.
So that's I think that's an important part of therapy. I think, but there's so much more than that.
Right. And what about the EMDR? That's more like a tactile, physical.
EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is a terrible title for trauma resolution therapy. That's been, when I first heard about it 20 years ago, I thought it was some kind of new age gobbledygook, because they were talking about resolving PTSD with eye movements. And I'm like, how does that happen? Essentially what EMDR does is it uses something called bilateral stimulation to engage both hemispheres of the brain to help people reprocess traumatic memories. When something is traumatic, it is whatever it is for that person that overwhelms your ability to cope with it in the moment. And trauma, to a great extent, is stored in the right hemisphere of the brain. We have a right hemisphere of the brain that processes emotion, big picture ideas, and a left hemisphere that processes language, linear thinking. When something happens that's traumatic, it overwhelms the person emotionally, and they can't make sense of it. So EMDR takes that traumatic event, helps the person not relive it, but hold it in your awareness, along with a negative belief you've developed about yourself because of that trauma. And then we use bilateral stimulation to engage the left and the right hemisphere of the brain to process the emotions and create a coherent narrative for it, so that eventually it doesn't erase memories, but it takes the traumatic charge out of the memory, so it can be kind of filed away like any other memory, and people don't have to have flashbacks about it any longer.
Wow, so you can unwind all that. That's amazing. So, I mean, here we are. I mean, wouldn't you rather have someone that understands all of these processes and be able to break it down from 0 to 10 and back and forth to help you unwind and get you back to a certain amount of health? So I want to say thank you for coming on again, Jim.
Pleasure.
And breaking down very complex processes into a super simple, easy to metabolize way of practicing a new way of life and letting go of what no longer serves us. So thanks again for coming on to SSP 32. We're going to do some quick shout outs right here on the Super Sober Podcast. You can email us. You can get through to Jim. He's on the resources page on f3recovery.org. You can email us at info@f3recovery.org or info@supersoberpodcast.org. You can follow us on YouTube and all the listening platforms. Shout out to the Detox, a story I wrote about the addiction, the deadliest disease a man's ever known. You can see the one sheet on the f3recovery.org. Hopefully someone's listening out in Hollywood. We can get that out there for people to binge watch. And shout out to Notorious JID, kicking back, listening, the first mascot of recovery. And if you need any help out there, we're out there. We want to be the guides. We want to help out as much as you can, but you can't really help people if we're not willing to get any help. So open that space, let go a little bit, and maybe a little bit can come in. So thanks for listening on SSP 32. Thanks, Jim. Shout out to Solomon in the background there, making it all happen, and keep on keeping on.
Thank you for listening to the Super Sober Podcast. Go to our website at f3recovery.org. That's F3Recovery, all one word, .org. We're turning fight, flight, and freeze into free form and flow through practicing the 12 steps and staying accountable to change. Don't forget to keep on keeping on.